30 seconds, what should we do? But I do think that more emphasis on healthcare, and emphasis not the healthcare that we're hearing about controversially, but actually for those that are mentally ill, and an emphasis on getting people into institutions and looking at that as being more important, the priority, rather than taking away people's weapons.
The problem is not the item, the device, the weapon, whether it's a gun or a knife or a stick or a stone. The problem is the individual. It goes back to biblical times. Abel and Cain, presumably a rock. A bad person killed an innocent person. One of the most bloodthirsty murderers on the face of the earth was Attila the Hun. But Attila the Hun didn't have a gun. Attila the Hun didn't have a gun. But he stacked the skulls of his enemies in pyramids that were 20 feet tall and let the birds pick the flesh off of the bones. So you see, it's the individual, not the device, that we have to be concerned about.
JB?
Get rid of the gun-free zone crap. Don't tee up the targets for people that are a little off, people a little mentally ill, or somebody that doesn't take a negative response from a boss the wrong way, because he's got a very easy opportunity when we've teed up so many places that we know that nobody in there has a gun. Get rid of the gun-free restriction. That could be an executive order that Mr. Obama, President Obama, could handle in between beers.
All right, we're gonna have time for one question right here. Please tell me your name. Mohegan Sun folks, please just give me, if you can, like 13 more minutes. And I know you hate my guts.
Hi, I'm Bridget Chenault. I'm from Waterford. And unfortunately with Newtown, and God rest those people that got killed, but then they all went into this, oh, we got to do away with guns. Well, now we just saw in Pennsylvania where somebody used knives. Obviously, you can use anything if you really want to injure somebody and do great damage. It doesn't have to be a gun, doesn't have to be a knife. You can use anything to kill people. So again, yeah, they say guns, and we went through all this stuff in Connecticut to take away our rights with guns. How do we get it back? And how do we convince the government it's not the weapons, it's the people?
Rob, you want to answer that one first?
Well, I'm a Republican, but I'm a great admirer of a guy called John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was our president back in the 60s. I admired him greatly, and I was at the Kennedy Museum a year ago with my wife up in Boston. And I was captured by a phrase that he stated in a speech that he gave to a group like this. And he said, every citizen in America is a politician. And he meant politician in the best sense of the word. Every citizen is endowed under the Constitution with sovereign rights. It's we the people, not we the politicians or the potentates or anybody else. We're all politicians. Every single one of us has to be educated and has a responsibility not just to vote, but a responsibility to lobby and pressure our elected officials to do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, replace them with somebody who will. That's what a great Democrat once said a long time ago, and I think that still applies. And that's what we have to do.
All right, I want to switch gears and give you guys a chance to talk on another subject. And we'll try to, the last 3 or 4 minutes, kind of go round robin if there's anybody out there who has specific questions for these guys that can ask them. But let me ask you guys this. I'll start with you, Glenn. Does America still have better days ahead? In other words, is there still an exceptionalism in America, or have we lost that?
That's a great question, Lee. I think America does have much greater days ahead, and there's a problem. We really see the cultural elite in America today, and I think Scott sees this in DC, and other members of the panel see it, is that there's a sense that it's cool or it's okay to criticize America, put it down and look at it in a negative way. That's not the way it should be. We do have greater days ahead. I remember the malaise with Jimmy Carter in the late 70s. And it was over. We'd lost to communism in the late 70s. Along came a man like Ronald Reagan who turned that whole vision around and said, no, there are greater days ahead. So I think we as citizens need to embrace the idea that America, there's nothing wrong with loving America. They're the students singing this afternoon here, this evening, that were singing the national anthem. They're young people in the audience. There's nothing wrong, or impolite, or uncool, or not chic to love America. And I think we need to embrace that and say, America is the greatest nation in the world. And that's something to be proud of.
Scott?
Yeah, I'd say the best is yet to come for America. There's no doubt about that. I mean, when you look at this, the reason we're going to continue to be the best is because we've been asking the same question every generation. Every generation of Americans is not satisfied. We are strivers, and everybody in this room here tonight, you had relatives that fought and clawed and traveled the oceans to get here. And each one of you has built your life, and I can tell you right now, I have been to 55 countries around this world, and God bless America. That's all I can say.
JB?
I think we need to change the faces that haven't done what's in the best interest of all of us. And if we have a leadership that wants to identify black and brown for keeping them out of prison, keeping them in school, and poisoning them for success, then we've left out so many others, and we need to leave that in the dust.
Rob is exceptionally convinced.
I'm probably the oldest guy up here.
Clearly.
Probably the oldest guy up here. Clearly the oldest guy up here. I spent 4 years of my life fighting communism, fighting for freedom in Vietnam. And I find that I'm fighting the same fight right here in Connecticut, right here in America, fighting for freedom, fighting against a government that overpowers the citizens. But it's a damn good fight, and we can be successful. 5 years ago, I went back to Vietnam with my wife, who was in Hanoi, was at a location in the city where a B-52 had crashed and destroyed a neighborhood and killed a lot of people. And we went down the back alleys to look at the site, and I got down there, and I thought, this could be dangerous. I mean, these people that live here, they went through the war. This could be tough. And I saw an old mama-san sitting in her door next to where the plane had crashed. There was a big hole in the ground. And she was holding her grandchild in front of, and I went over to say, "Manyo Ekham," and say hello and sort of like this. And as she lifted her arm away from her grandson, he was wearing a little t-shirt. And on the t-shirt was Mickey Mouse. And I thought, hey, they've learned from the American experience. They have built free enterprise in a communist system from the American experience. They have valued the American culture, even if it's Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken. We have made an impression, and the people that I met and talked to all those years later that I'd been in the war, they were supportive of the United States and hopeful, and that what we had done there had given them hope and excitement for a better future. So yes, we ourselves have to go through the transformation of saying, we want a better future for our children. We don't want our children on government handouts. We don't want our children in government housing. We want our children to have jobs and freedom and choice and opportunity. That's what our ancestors came to this country for. That's why we're here. And if we have to get off our ass and do it, that's what we're going to do.
Let me ask you guys, would you guys come and see these four guys do this for a couple hours down the road somewhere along the line? Would you guys do that? I mean, I would pay for that, honestly. Would you guys come out if I could make that happen?
How much are you gonna pay?
I'm gonna pay you nothing. Who's that? You will pay. Glenn, nothing. Emily has somebody. We only have time for 3 more questions. I'm so sorry. I know the Mohegan Sun folks are actually giving me extra time right now, but 3 more questions and then we gotta go. Sir?
Yes, my name's Mike. Thanks for taking the question here. Back in the fall, I happened to hear on NPR, there was a debate. I had picked it up, it was already in session. Alan Dershowitz was conducting a survey. Well, actually, it was a panel discussion. He wasn't conducting it, and it was I believe some guys from the NRA, and there was Alan Dershowitz, anti-gun, and some of the people there directly. So the question directly to the Second Amendment, that's what they were talking about. And they were dissecting it. Well, let me step back from it. They polled the audience, and they went through this debate, and prior to the debate, the audience clearly was in favor of the Second Amendment. there were gun people, anti-gun, they all said it, as it stood and as it stands, as it reads, it's legitimate. At the end of the debate, they polled the audience, and Alan Dershowitz and the anti-gunners clearly had tipped the scales, and he said they dissected the words militia, the right to own and bear arms clearly should be the military only. So the point being is that persuasive debate changed the poll in the topic of the audience. So my question is, have you seen things like this happening, plus with the Constitution? Being attacked on this in the background, rewriting the Constitution, rewriting our amendments, and so forth to fit our society today.
Glenn, you want to answer that one?
Sure, I do think that it's not unsurprising that was on NPR, first and foremost. But I do, no, I think that's one of the dangers you run up against is the Constitution should be read as it was written. And I am what is known in Supreme Court jurisprudence as an originalist. And you look at the Constitution as it was written at the time, because the founders were genius. And they thought of a way, if you wanted to change the interpretation or change the way the Constitution was written, there's a process. And they were brilliant. They said through the amendment process. And we've used that in the past. If you want to choose to change the Constitution, change it, not through judges, or I like to call the Supreme Court the mullahs of the West, who sit and opine on these issues and decide what they think. We had Justice Scalia at the Academy a couple of weeks ago, and Justice Scalia said, listen, and he's an originalist, he said, Glenn, what do you expect? What other way to interpret the Constitution as it was written? Because if you say there's another way, what is it? And no one can tell you. What I feel that day? Do you want to change the rules every time? Do we change the rules and say that in a football game, that the field goal now, if the team's losing, that's a good group of people and they're the underdogs. The field goal now will count for 10 points because we feel bad for that team? That's what we're dealing with, and that's the problem. And yes, we deal with that every single day in the Constitution. The Constitution should be read, interpreted as it is written and was written.
Rob?
Well, now I gotta interrupt. Because the drop kick used to be in football, and rules do change. And I will say this, the original intent of the Constitution intended that women should not vote, that African Americans were not people, okay? So we cannot have a slavish devotion to people 200 years ago. This is our country now. The principles that have guided us are brilliant, have set the course for democracy throughout the world, but this is our democracy today. And so I would say that we should not just say, you know, as it was written, it shall always be done. We cannot be fundamentalists on this. We have to understand that, you know, America is changing, and for the better in a lot of ways.
And I don't dispute that. And one of the things is my dear friend Scott and my boss in some ways, and mentor, I will tell you, he's right. And the genius in the founders is that you could change it. It's through the amendment process, so the people can decide, and not 9 unelected justices decide what you think it should be.
I'll agree with that.
Very briefly on a side issue, you mentioned it was an NPR debate, so the audience was pre-selected. You mentioned that they were polled before and after the debate. I see a couple of politicians in the crowd. I see Mike Doyle over there. Mike, have you had any familiarity with polls? Can you adjust the outcome of a poll by adjusting the people that take the poll? Hell yes, you can. So, I mean, you know, if in fact the debate took place in this place with this audience, my guess is that you would not have a similar outcome. You would not have a similar outcome.
All right, one more question.